I can't believe I read that book. It is June, so we are doing basically a series of videos where we do a retrospective of what I have read so far this year, and this week's video is about I cannot believe I read that book. This is mostly going to be pretty negative, I'm not going to lie, but I'm be talking about books, so I'm like, I read this book and I'm like, this is... I don't know if it was bad, like, why did I read this, or at least I know why I read the books, but good lord, no one should be reading this book, or if you're going to read this book, be warned. That's the kind of vibe we're going for in this video, so if you want to get the books, I'm going to put them in the description down below, apart from one, which I just don't want anyone to read, or pick them up from your local library, because we love supporting the local library here, but let's get right into it. We're going to start off with a big one. We're starting off with Hannah Ardent's On Violence. Oh my god. Let me set the scene for you. I returned some books to my library. And I was like, you know what, let me have a quick browse, because after this I'm going to be staying in town, getting a coffee and doing some work. So I went to the philosophy section, as I always do, and they had a bunch of new books. Annoyingly, they hadn't put any of the plastic covers on these books, and I really hate when they don't do that, because it's like, well, what if I spill my coffee on this book? I'm screwed. I don't know. Whatever. And it was there, and I was like, I have seen people talk about this book, and I've seen Hannah Ardent a lot. And I was like, I've only heard bad things about her, rightfully so. And I was like, you know what, let me pick this up and see. And it's not long, it's like 70 something pages. It's basically a pamphlet. And so I was like, I picked it up and I went to the coffee shop I was going to, and I bought my matcha. It was a pure matcha, it wasn't a matcha latte. 3 calories, let's go. Anyway, so I was sitting there reading it and I was like, this is... oh my god. So I was like, you know what, let me just power through this entire thing and then do my work. So I sat there drinking my matcha and then reading this, and I was like, what the fish and chips is going on here? And I was like, I'm embarrassed to be reading this. If someone sees me read this, they're going to think I'm a horrible human being, and we'll get into that now. And just some background, the only people I've seen say good things about Hannah Ardent are white liberals and white conservatives who are basically on the same page. Hannah Ardent's book is basically her On Violence, is her arguing that oppressed peoples should not fight back against those who are oppressing them. They should not use violence to fight back against their oppression. She spends a lot of the time trying to downplay Frantz Fanon's Wretched of the Earth, and I'm like, none of these arguments really make any sense. She's basically saying Fanon is just calling for violence for no reason. You know, she's like, oh yeah, I kind of get what he's saying, but also it's kind of bad that he's telling people to, you know, violently resist their oppression. And then she specifically goes into, you know, attacking African Americans for their resistance against particularly police brutality, and basically being like, oh, you know, African Americans are just inherently violent and they want to fight the police and it's a bad thing about them. And you know, it's like, what are you talking about? You know, it's like, oh my days. And I think anyone who pushes the same narratives as her, they don't see the explicit racism in Hannah Ardent's writing, and the explicit, like, I don't want to say hatred, I don't know if it's hatred, but like deliberate, I don't know, naivety or ignorance towards the struggle of African Americans, and how, you know, we know for a fact that when the Black Panthers started arming themselves, when the Black Panthers started doing the patrols of the police officers whilst armed, even when the Black Panthers were arming themselves in California, you know, the capitalist class, the bourgeoisie, were like, oh, we can't allow this, we can't allow that solidarity. Even like the Breakfast Club, they couldn't allow that because it was building working class solidarity, not just within the African American community, but across communities as well. They made changes because of that. We know in apartheid South Africa, the presence of the Spear of the Nation, the MK, their presence forced the apartheid regime to go and negotiate with the ANC. And we know that these things work. Are they going to be the be-all and end-all of your ability to end your oppression? Probably not. You kind of need both things, both negotiation and also violent resistance. But also, even go further back, the Haitian revolt only worked because of their violent resistance. We saw even like the Warsaw Ghetto uprisings, with people trying to fight back against their oppressors. And it's like, you can't just be like, yeah, being violent against your oppressors is wrong, guys, because that just doesn't work, And so this is, not only does the argument she makes not make sense, but it is heavily textured with racism and anti-African American rhetoric throughout. And I was like, it's not even worth unless you are someone who is, I'm a philosophy student, and a sociology student as well. So I'm like, okay, I guess I'll read this because these are things that people I talk to and learn from are reading and discussing. Unless you were doing it for a specific reason like that, like I did, like I saw it and I was like, well, I guess as a philosophy and sociology student, I should maybe read this person who is rather, at the time I was like, seems controversial. I don't know, they're just out racist. For me it was like, yeah, fine, I'll read it, but I wouldn't say to just an average person to like, oh, I want to read like books about sociology and psychology and philosophy. I want to read one. I was like, just don't read Hannah Arendt. Like, you don't need to, because especially if you're someone who doesn't have a ideology going into it, or you are maybe a liberal, you might just be like, yeah guys, why can't we just listen to Hannah Arendt and both sides are bad. If you fight back against your oppressor, you're just as bad. And that's the kind of thing this kind of book is going to spread amongst people. I spoke about that book for way too long. Okay, so that one was the one where I'm going to be the most negative about. Going forward, these ones aren't going to be as negative of a section. Up next is The Alchemist. So again, I've spoken about this book before, but I personally feel like this book is way too individualistic for how popular it is. And again, I will say, when I'm reading books now, I basically look at them from more of a Marxist analysis lens than I did in the past. I feel like there is a focus specifically on the individual and a lack of appreciation of the people around our protagonist. And again, me not liking the protagonist does not make this necessarily a bad book. Like, prose wise, writing wise, I don't think this is bad. For my own personal taste, I think it's a little bit too not too descriptive, but it feels like you're doing a lot here, mate, and you're not progressing the plot forward very much. Again, as someone who is a trained screenwriter, that's maybe just the way I see things. So obviously, when it comes to that kind of criticism, that is more of a personal taste thing. But I did feel like, from a analysis of your plot point of view, our protagonist at some points kind of acknowledges the people around them, but for the most part, it feels like the protagonist is like, it is all about me, it is my journey, I am the center of attention here. And there's like an exception, which is the girl he falls in love with. I'm going to do spoilers, this book is like 50 years old. Like, there's the girl he falls in love with, and that is the only person he kind of considers as another person, but also he still sees everything through, how can my relationship with this person help me advance on my journey? And when you have the other characters also basically simply being there to advance the plot of our protagonist and giving them this very neoliberal individualistic ideology of, yeah, you know, you could stay here and help me, but you should go and do the thing that is for yourself, to be just yourself. And look, I'm not saying this as a critique of saying like, oh, people should not try and, you know, improve themselves. They should. But everything in this book is geared around this one individual and this one individual's drive and this one individual's goal. Instead of there being a collective, you can collectively advance all of your characters whilst also having them pursue individual goals. It, again, I think is more so me being like, ugh. Because I went into this book knowing it is popular. I've seen people talk about it so much on the internet. When I was a bookseller, I remember selling loads of this book as well. So I knew people went out and sought out this book. And I was just like, this book just felt like way too neoliberal in terms of politics. And I think it was also written in like the 80s. So that kind of makes sense as well. Also, I did feel like it was a little bit Orientalist. Like some of the descriptions of particularly women, I was like, this does feel like a European man leering at North African and Southwest Asian women. So that felt a little bit, and also just the people as well. But, you know, I wouldn't say it is super duper Orientalist. There were just certain aspects where it leaned into Orientalist tropes. And the final book we're going to be talking about is Crystallizing Public Opinion by Edward Bernays. This one is actually one where I'm going to talk about why actually, even though I feel like, why did I read this book? I do kind of get the importance of reading this. So Edward Bernays is basically known as the king of public relations and propaganda. You know, he was part of, he was basically the one that gave the United States the justification for invading parts of South America. He was behind many of the public relations and advertising. He's basically like the king of advertising, the advertising industry for like cigarettes. He then obviously then was like, oh, I don't, you know, cigarettes are bad, I'm gonna stop doing this. But, you know, he did that. He really shaped how neoliberal and right-wing politics kind of appealed to the masses. And ideologically, he was pretty much an anti-communist, even though, like, when you're reading his books, he doesn't really, he like talks about, you know, oh, if you want to, you know, basically run your political campaign, and, you know, an easy way to get votes against your opponent is to label them a communist. And he kind of acknowledges the absurdity of it. But basically, this is not a good man. This is a man who essentially all the like the horrible things you see, particularly the far right, doing in terms of trying to appeal to people, and just, you know, the neoliberal corporations too, kind of came through him. It wasn't just him alone. There were other people who had similar ideas and thoughts, but he is the one that has really crystallized into being the individual that is seen as the father of modern propaganda, of modern PR and whatnot. Now, this one in particular, I do say, okay, maybe it is worth reading, because those of us who are trying to combat these individuals and the ideology of these individuals should actually learn what they are thinking. So, like, even that Hannah Arendt book, I kind of did go into being like, okay, well, I had an inkling I would not agree with this individual, I would not agree with their ideology, and so actually learning their ideology and seeing what people who follow them think, it's like, oh, I don't like it, I don't want to do it, actually, but it is important to do it. And it is important to like have that thought when you go into reading these books, because I you know, it's like, I can very easily just be like, I'm done, I'm not going to read the rest of this. But if I read all of it and understand it and be able to process, I can then work to counter it, you know, learn your enemy's tactics, learn your enemy's ideology, and you can help combat it. I think it's why you see a lot of people who very serious academics, not, the kind of people who have podcasts, but serious anti-communist academics will read communist texts and then, in their way, very poorly, but try and pick it apart and actually be able, if you're able to understand it, you can at the very least try and create an argument against it, and make it seem convincing. That's why when you've got like a podcast bro talking about communism, it's like, what the hell is this fella talking about? But when you have, they are academics, arguing against it, that's how people try and, like this Jordan Peterson guy, his like anti-communist arguments aren't very good, but he knows how to like talk about it. And even I feel like for him personally, his understanding of Marxism isn't good either, but at the very least he has read it so he can quote it and he can actually try and construct an argument. And that's kind of why we need to be reading these books. I feel kind of bad putting The Alchemist here with those two books, because like The Alchemist, even though I don't agree with the politics and the politics of the plot line, I don't think it's as bad as the other two. I'd still think if you want to read The Alchemist, yeah, sure, whatever, but the other two you should really read through the lens of I'm trying to understand my class enemy here. So those are some why did I read that books I have read this year. To be honest, there aren't many more choices for me this year. I think this year I've been very picky thus far with what I've read. I do have a very large backlog, which eventually I will just have to power through. Winter's when I do most of my reading anyway, so I'll probably power through it later on in the year. And for the most part, I have maybe books apart from the ones I've been given by friends who work at publishing companies, the ones I've been able to pick up for free. The ones I buy myself are generally the ones I know I am going to enjoy or resonate with politically. So, it was good to challenge myself with a couple of these books here, but yeah, it's kind of it's rough. They are rough. But let me know in the comments down below if there are any books you've read this year or recently where you've been like, why did I read that book? It'd be quite fun to know that. And before we end, I do want to give a special shout out to my members. Members, they get access to bonus video, bonus content, bonus videos, more than one, bonus content. They get to be part of a book club we have, a movie club. At the moment, we are reading The Big Gold Dream by Chester Himes, and the movie is going to be the Redwall movie, the Redwall animated movie. They are also once a month, at least one of the tiers is getting access to monthly essays as well. So if you are interested, you can join from as little as £1 a month. Even just the £1 a month really will and does help. I want to be making more of these videos. I want to be doing more on YouTube as well. So, if you are interested, you can do that by hitting join down below or on my channel. But regardless, thank you for getting to this part of the video. Ooh. Remember to like, subscribe, and share the video with a friend or family member. And hey, I hope you read a great book today.